This is part two of a serialized expose on Crossfire Hurricane, the FBI's 2016 investigation into Donald Trump's campaign. The series is powered by the April 2025 document drop, thousands of long classified FBI files that finally exposed how the story started, who pushed it, and what they covered to keep it alive. Each episode peels back what the Bureau claimed and what their own documents later revealed. They said the FBI had no choice, that a Trump advisor spilled the beans in a London bar, and the Bureau had to act. The story goes that George Papadopoulos, a young foreign policy advisor to Donald Trump, told an Australian diplomat that Russia had dirt on Hillary Clinton, and that this conversation, forced the FBI's hand. But that story only works if you don't know who said what, where it came from, or how the people involved vanished as soon as the story went public. George Papadopoulos wasn't a power broker. He was a 28-year-old with no security clearance, no real access, and no operational relevance. He was brought onto Trump's campaign in March 2016 as part of a hastily assembled foreign policy team. The man on the receiving end of his offhand comment was Alexander Downer, Australia's High Commissioner to the UK, essentially their ambassador. Downer wasn't just some protocol-level diplomat. He was Australia's longest-serving foreign minister, a major political figure in global diplomatic circles, and deeply connected to Western intelligence networks. Though his party affiliation leaned center-right by Australian standards, his actions in this episode ended up serving Clinton-aligned interests. He had previously overseen multi-million-dollar donations to the Clinton Foundation while serving as Australia's foreign minister. In 2006, under his tenure, the Australian government approved a $25 million grant to the Clinton Foundation for AIDS relief work, an arrangement that raised eyebrows when Clinton re-entered U.S. politics. It wasn't illegal, but it connected Downer on paper to the Clinton world in ways that complicated his later role in this U.S. election drama. In short, he was a seasoned player with access and motive, exactly the kind of figure who could deliver a storyline across borders without leaving fingerprints. George Papadopoulos and Alexander Downer met at a bar in London in early May. On paper, it was a casual diplomatic outreach, but the power gap between them was real. Downer was a veteran operator with decades of experience navigating political and intelligence channels. Papadopoulos, on the other hand, was a rookie, young, eager, and trying to prove he had access. If Downer's goal was to see what George would offer, George's instinct was to impress. That made him easy to draw out and easy to frame. The meeting wasn't accidental. Downer requested it. As Australia's top diplomat in the UK, Downer had reason to meet with newly minted Trump advisors, but this wasn't just casual outreach. Papadopoulos had been trying to build relationships abroad, and Downer, reportedly aware of his role, arranged the sit-down. That context matters, because what happened next wasn't a leak, it was a setup waiting for a trigger. Papadopoulos allegedly said that Russia had dirt on Hillary Clinton, specifically thousands of emails. But Downer didn't sound the alarm. He didn't report the conversation right away. He sat on it for 2 months. Only after WikiLeaks published internal DNC emails on July 22, 2016, did Downer mention the conversation to U.S. officials. The FBI received the tip on July 26th, but it didn't come directly from Downer. He passed it to Elizabeth Dibble, the deputy chief of mission at the U.S. Embassy in London. From there, it was forwarded to the FBI's legal attaché office, which drafted the official communication. That extra step matters, because it wasn't a panicked diplomat going straight to law enforcement. It was a slow-moving cable that entered the system just in time to justify what had already begun. Crossfire Hurricane launched 5 days later, and that delay, those 2 months of silence, matters. If Papadopoulos' words were as explosive as the FBI later claimed, Downer had a duty to report them immediately. The fact that he didn't speaks volumes. It suggests the comment wasn't seen as alarming at the time. It only became valuable after the DNC emails went public, when a story was needed and a narrative needed structure. What makes this strange isn't just the speed, it's the timing, because by the time the tip arrived, the groundwork was already in motion. And even if you strip away every other fact, no bias, no agenda, just pure procedure, it still doesn't hold. The FBI received a secondhand summary of a 2-month-old barroom conversation between a low-level campaign advisor and a foreign diplomat. There was no transcript, no recording, and no indication that Papadopoulos had direct knowledge of any Russian plot. He didn't even say the Trump campaign was coordinating with anyone. He didn't describe how Russia got the emails, who they spoke to, or what they planned to do. In fact, everything we know now suggests Papadopoulos was guessing or repeating something someone else wanted him to say. Because here's what we now know. Yes, the DNC emails were real. But George has never fully confirmed the conversation as Downer described it. He admitted meeting Downer. He acknowledged talking about Russia in emails. But he's consistently said his words were taken out of context and that he was set up. According to Papadopoulos, he wasn't delivering intelligence, he was repeating something he'd been told. The person who told him, that would be Joseph Mifsud, a professor, Maltese by nationality, but international by design, whose resume was littered with diplomatic panels, Western academic institutions, and intelligence-adjacent roles. He'd been operating in those circles since at least the early 2000s, almost as long as George Papadopoulos had been alive. He held advisory posts, gave lectures on diplomacy and international security, and routinely appeared at conferences attended by NATO-affiliated officials and EU strategists. He wasn't a rogue actor. He was seasoned, embedded, the kind of figure you send to plant something, then pull out before the blowback. He floated between London, Rome, and Brussels, always just connected enough to be useful, but never tethered to anything that could be pinned down. Mifsud met Papadopoulos in late April 2016, just weeks after George joined the Trump team, and allegedly told him the Russians had thousands of emails on Clinton. That's the exact language Papadopoulos told to Downer. So where did Mifsud get it? That's the question no one has answered. Because once his name entered the public narrative, Mifsud disappeared. And here's what the April 2025 document drop made even more suspicious. The only known FBI interview with Mifsud, a February 2017 302 report, showed agents barely questioned him about Russian interference at all. According to that record, Mifsud denied any advanced knowledge of election meddling and said he never discussed it with George. He wasn't pressed, he wasn't charged, and if he was really the basis for opening a multi-year counterintelligence operation into a presidential campaign, the FBI's treatment of him was inexplicably soft. Either he wasn't the real reason, they never wanted to know more, or both. Man, this is crazy. I'm going through the Crossfire Hurricane stuff, obviously, for this series, and it's structured like a great political thriller. Every twist, every missing name, every convenient silence. This should be a movie, and the more I dig, the more insane it becomes. How orchestrated, how subtle, and how easily it all passed as legitimate. I didn't realize just how deep the setup ran until now. Mifsud is so off limits, it's almost comedic. The DOJ and FBI under Trump-aligned leadership, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, didn't mention him once in the April 10th, 2025 document release, not even a passing reference. That silence speaks louder than any redaction. Mifsud never testified. He was never charged. And to this day, there is no confirmed report of where he is. We don't know if he's alive or dead. We don't know if he's on a beach somewhere in Israel, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, or maybe he got the full Clinton send-off, vanished without a trace, and just enough plausible deniability to call it coincidence. He is a ghost, and he's the ghost that started it all. Maybe that's why the FBI never tried very hard to find him, because Joseph Mifsud wasn't a source. He was a MacGuffin, a convenient, disposable plot device, just believable enough to set things in motion and just forgettable enough to disappear afterward. The term MacGuffin comes from screenwriting, originally coined in discussions about Alfred Hitchcock's thrillers. It's the thing the characters chase, the thing that seems important, but in the end, it was just there to move the story forward. That was Mifsud. A narrative trigger, nothing more, and exactly enough. And maybe that's the final twist. He was never meant to be found, not by Democrats, not by Republicans, because what he carried wasn't evidence. It was the kind of story no one in power wants to account for. What followed wasn't accidental, it was planted. Papadopoulos didn't go looking for Russian dirt. It came to him, and it came through a man whose name vanished from the public record the moment it became inconvenient. So was this tip a warning, or was it a trigger? Was it intelligence or a setup? The FBI treated it like a bombshell, but by every standard of federal procedure, it was barely a spark. Opening a full counterintelligence investigation into a presidential campaign requires more than suspicion. It requires predication, real evidence, real oversight, and real accountability. FBI protocols demand that political investigations receive extra scrutiny, higher level approval, and sensitive designation. None of that happened here. The Bureau didn't open a preliminary inquiry. They opened a full case. They didn't inform Congress. They didn't validate the source. They moved fast because the story fit. They needed a clean origin story, one they could defend, one that didn't involve paid opposition research or buried surveillance operations. And they found it in a bar in London 2 months after the conversation happened, 5 days before they launched the investigation, and long after the politics had already taken over. Let's reset the timeline. In April, the DNC and Clinton campaign hired Fusion GPS. Later that same month, Joseph Mifsud approached George Papadopoulos and told him Russia had thousands of Clinton emails. In early May, Papadopoulos repeated that to Alexander Downer over drinks in London. In June, Fusion GPS brought on Christopher Steele, who began assembling the dossier. Then on July 22nd, WikiLeaks released the hacked DNC emails. 4 days later, Downer finally passed along the conversation he'd been sitting on for 2 months. By July 31st, just 5 days after the tip reached FBI hands, Crossfire Hurricane was officially launched. That matters because it shows alignment, not coincidence. The campaign hires the Oppo firm. A connected academic delivers the email narrative to a young, eager advisor. That advisor repeats it to a diplomat with deep ties to Clinton's circle. And the moment the leaks go public, the tip is routed to the FBI. Just in time to greenlight an investigation they were already warming up. Nothing about that timeline looks organic. It looks built. The man who seeded the story vanished. The one who repeated it just happened to be inexperienced. The diplomat who caught it had a Clinton-connected resume. The diplomat sat on it until the politics lined up. The bureau who acted on it had already made up its mind. Most of this, especially the Mifsud timeline and Downer's diplomatic handoff, only came to light officially from the federal government in the April 2025 drop. This wasn't the beginning of an investigation. It was the final draft of a script that had been in rewrites for months. Most of this, especially Mifsud's timeline and the Downer report sequence, was only confirmed by documents declassified in the April 2025 drop. They didn't want this part of the story public because it didn't look like defense. It looked like coordination. And now we know. Next, episode 3, the case they already started.